The last 14 days have felt a little like Lloyd Bridges in the movie Airplane. Looked like I picked the wrong week to stop sniffing headlines. Our number one story in the countdown, a new and all too infrequent segment on the News Hour, While I Was Out. In no particular order, which of these signs of the apocalypse will you still be talking about next month? Comedian Rush Limbaugh is now stealing my material. He actually hesitated to put this on the record for the piece the New York Times Magazine did, fricasseeing him, but finally he acknowledged about Bill O'Reilly, quote, "Somebody's got to say it. The man is Ted Baxter." Liberal elements of the Rush Limbaugh program are now exporting Viagra to Iran. Moral? You can fool some of the falafels all the time, and you can fool all the falafels some of the time, but you can't even fool the Limbaugh falafel all the time. Jesse Jackson used a racial epithet and a street term for male genitalia about Senator Barack Obama during a conversation he thought private in a Chicago television studio. The mics were open, the tape was rolling, and the stuff wound up on, naturally, the Billo the Clown Hour. Lost in the foofery about Jackson's language. Actual news organizations have rules against using such material on the air. If a guest says he's planning to kill somebody, or if he says anything while he's running for president, that's different. Otherwise, putting the recording on the air is a far worse offense than whatever was put on the air could have been. It's called eavesdropping. Moral? Imagine the right-wing Armageddon-like reaction if it had been a friend of John McCain's saying something similar about him, and we had run the surreptitious tape here on Countdown. Not that Senator Obama was always more sinned against than sinning. Forgets to remind his supporters to help out Senator Clinton with her campaign debt. Exits stage left and has to be sent back out to make the pitch. Moral? Dr. Freud! Baseball's All-Star Game in New York City was preceded by a parade of heroes, past and present, up 6th Avenue. Here's something you didn't know. The guy driving the vehicle on which Orioles great Cal Ripken was riding was James Carville. The game itself ran a little long because the National League blew a 3-2 lead in the bottom of the 8th inning because of a managerial blunder. Billy Wagner is a Hall of Fame relief pitcher, but a creature of precise habits. He never pitches well when he enters a game in the middle of an inning rather than at the start of one. National League manager Clint Hurdle, apparently the only person at Yankee Stadium last night who did not know this fact, brought Wagner in with one out and nobody on in the middle of the bottom of the 8th, and Wagner promptly gave up the tying run. The game thus continued until the 15th inning and ended with the American League winning at 1:37 a.m. Eastern Time. Moral? Like everybody from George Tenet to Norman Podhoretz, Wagner is one of a group of baseball players being honored tonight at the White House by the president. Baseball lost a lovely man last week, Bobby Ray Mercer of the New York Yankees. Of his skills as a player and an announcer, of his courage and awakening to the joy of life in the face of cancer, you may have heard. Bobby was also a political firebrand who in the last 4 years must have come up to me 20 times with a big broad smile on his face, once even a hug, saying, "Keith, leave my president alone." But on the field in March 2006, in our first visit since Hurricane Katrina, Bobby Mercer said something really different. Has my president always been like that? He was that week? Or did he just go bad recently? We also lost Tony Snow, another lovely man with whom I could not possibly have disagreed more, but whose humanity lent hope that we might someday again all share a political stage in which neither side believes it must ultimately be winner take all. Unfortunately, Mr. Snow had many around him who learned nothing from his ability to separate the message from the messenger. After I said something nice about him, Rupert Murdoch's non-profit newspaper, the New York Post, quoting an unnamed friend of Mr. Snow who said I had, quote, no relationship with Tony at all. The Post reminded its reader that I had put him on the worst persons list on January 9th, 2007. In point of fact, my relationship with Tony Snow, which was entirely by email, began right after January 9th, 2007, when he wrote and joked that I should laminate that photo since I'd probably be using it again on future lists, and that while he often wanted to yell at the TV, he watched this show and enjoyed it. To anybody who could write that note with that humor, I owed a statement of grief on the occasion of his passing. Not to demean his memory with too much of the Post, but two other notes. The writer, Marianne Garvey, finished off her fabrication by adding, quote, a rep for Olbermann didn't get back to us. This was a deliberate lie on Ms. Garvey's part. She had an extensive email exchange with our press relations department and one phone conversation during which Ms. Garvey hung up on our PR person. Also, the Post wrote that I was once again disrespecting the dead. The MSNBC blowhard, who was overheard jockeying for Tim Russert's Meet the Press gig during Russert's memorial reception in Washington last month, Sorry. When you made that crap up last month, you claimed it was Chris Matthews who was overheard jockeying. So not only was your lie wrong, but your lie about your lie was also wrong. Moral, Marianne Garvey and Richard Johnson and their boss Rupert Murdoch are sick people. The ethical equivalent of grave robbers. And then there was this. What the? Did the New Yorker have the right to print this? Well, of course it did. Did the New Yorker show any of the insight, brilliance, perspective, fingers on the pulse of the nation stuff that has made it the envy of the magazine business since the days of James Thurber? Not a drop. This looks like just plain editorial stupidity, but there's a second viewpoint here that this was another in a small series of clunky overtures by the magazine towards the right wing. And that theory calls to mind New Yorker hero Thurber's own fable about the alcoholic bear who would reel home at night, kick over the umbrella stand, knock down the bridge lamps, and ram his elbows through the windows. Then he would collapse on the floor and lie there until he went to sleep. His wife was greatly distressed, and his children were very frightened. Thurber's drunken bear eventually sobers up and becomes a teetotaler and an anti-booze fitness exhibitionist. To demonstrate this, Thurber wrote, he would stand on his head and on his hands, and he would turn cartwheels in the house, kicking over the umbrella stand, knocking down the bridge lamps, and ramming his elbows through the windows. Then he would lie down on the floor, tired by his healthful exercise, and go to sleep. His wife was greatly distressed, and his children were very frightened. Moral? From James Thurber's own pen to the New Yorker of 2008, you might as well fall flat on your face as lean over too far backward.